Story 1. About 15 years ago, I had the Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, and I spoke to them for a good 20 minutes. They said they would come back the next day. When they didn't, I was sad. That was my sign to leave the house and rejoin the living. Story 2. Oversharing with someone they do not know too well or are not too close with. It is trying to force a friendship or connection instantly to gratify that deep-seated loneliness. Story 3. Moving away from social interaction because you feel separate and apart from others. Being around them hurts more than being alone and reminds you of what you do not have. Even though you want connection and to be seen and heard. Throwing yourself into work because it provides some sort of purpose, direction, and structure when you have none in your personal life. I did not expect so many upvotes. This had been me in the past and was me for the last 18 months. I gave up. All I had was work. Grind it out until I cannot anymore, then quietly expire. I am struggling, and there is nothing to look forward to. Shining at work, screaming in silence outside of it. How can I tell anyone about this? I told myself I had to bear this on my own. My secret, my shame. I had gotten myself in a hole so deep and dark I could not see the sky anymore. I worked it out by talking to ChatGPT of all things, and it got darker, but it is getting better. It was painful to realize I was creating my own reality of a joyless, unfulfilling life. So I asked myself, could I change that? It was more a case of I had to. I finally reached out to a couple of people who had my back, and I have started to strike out for the surface. I decided to say yes when before I would say no and force myself to try things, to take any opportunity to break the routine, and if there were no offers, I would look for stuff to do and go out and do it. Activities, talks, drop-in sessions. Finally, I could see the sky again. It is a lot to share, but hopefully, there is something useful here for someone. Story 4. They agreed to do things they disliked with others simply because it was their one chance to experience a few moments of social contact. But really, I always longed for meaningful conversation about things I genuinely cared about. Don't fall into that trap like I did. Unfortunately, it is the pathological people-pleaser in me. Story 5. Very good points here, but I would like to add excessive talking. When somebody is constantly talking and it's hard to get away from the conversation, I am no psychologist, but it seems very common with lonely people. Story 6. Giving up on personal care. You're not trying to impress anyone, so why bother? Social awkwardness or isolation. You don't get a lot of interaction, so you lose the finer points. Talking to yourself. We all do it, but you forget where it's appropriate and where it's not. Your therapist becomes your closest friend. Therapists are not our friends. They should remain objective, but it feels like they know you better than anyone else does. Story 7. They try really hard to make sure everyone is involved in a group activity or conversation. They do not want others to feel the pain they feel when they feel lonely. Story 8. If they can go a full day or more without saying a word because no one reaches out to them or talks to them. When you feel a crippling emptiness after talking to someone because it's the first engagement you've had in who knows how long. When you withdraw because it is easier than being around people, as doing so just reminds you once they're gone about how alone you truly feel. When you wait for messages or conversations, knowing you always reach out to keep it going but deep down knowing your friends and family are actually living life and won't get back to you for days. It's not being alone, it's having no one or so few people actually wanting to connect and spend time with you, be it in person or even a text, that you just feel this emptiness grow and grow. Each day another chip drags more of you away, and the best you hope for is for the emptiness to remain where it is. Story 9. Mostly they will seek out any kind of company. But this is only for those who suffer acute loneliness. For those with more long-term loneliness, you may think they are unlikable, and that's the way they like it to be. Story 10. Withdrawal from social interaction. Avoiding social events or gatherings. Spending excessive time alone or isolating themselves. Becoming unusually quiet or disengaged during conversations. Overcompensating by seeking constant attention or reassurance. Slumped posture or lack of energy. Avoiding eye contact or appearing distracted. Story 11. When they interact with you, they are highly open about their feelings or opinions, just trying to express how they feel. This generally means nobody is there to listen to how they feel, especially if it just seems to be something they can't help but do. Story 12. They are the ones eating at restaurants alone. Me. My Christmas meal was at Golden Corral today. The server asked if I wanted to eat alone or with someone. Story 13. Since I live far away from my friends and family, the only people I talk to are my wife and my coworkers during online meetings. I'm naturally confident, but I find that when I finally get to talk to someone else after a couple of months of this setup, the fact that I can't speak either in the corporate jargon I'm used to with my coworkers or in the incredibly relaxed and open way I'm used to with my wife, I start to stutter and fumble over my own words. This quickly goes away after a day or two, but it does happen nonetheless. Story 14. Not knowing boundaries or social rules. Someone who has been lonely for a long time, especially as a child, might not be socially smart or aware. They might say things that seem rude, discriminating, or even just obscure. But they don't do that to harm someone, rather because they're testing boundaries. Once they cross a boundary, for example by saying something rude, they might even enjoy the reactions of others because they're not used to being seen, so they don't even notice that they're being viewed as mean or rude because they never learned how to act in social surroundings. Even if they notice that what they're doing is wrong, it takes a lot of patience and self-awareness to change. This is why many people who have been lonely for a long time turn to harmful words, just to get reactions and feel seen. For others, it is really hard to empathize with these people, which makes learning social cues for that person even harder. Story 15. I think loneliness is often hidden in plain sight, and I've noticed it in myself at times. Like when I catch myself sharing memes or random thoughts with people, hoping they'll respond, even if it's just a laugh out loud. Or when I linger in conversations longer than I should, pretending I have more to say, but really just not wanting the moment to end. It's not like I want to admit I'm lonely, but the signs sneak out anyway. I remember once I laughed way too loudly at a mediocre joke during a group chat, just because it felt good to be included, even for a second. Or how I sometimes go out of my way to make plans, even if I'm exhausted, just to avoid sitting with the quiet. It's weird how much effort we put into hiding loneliness, even when all we want is for someone to notice. Story 16. I pretty much wear green all the time and always have. But in high school for St. Patrick's Day, I wore no green on the outside, but I wore green underwear. I just told my friends about that yesterday, and I realized that I did it so that I would have some sort of human contact by being pinched. Story 17. They have a very pessimistic view of everyone else who is not lonely. Half the people commenting on relationship advice posts telling people to divorce are clearly angry and alone. Story 18, bit of an odd one, but arguing with service people for no good reason. Especially around the holidays, when someone comes in to argue, it feels like it's because there's nothing else for them to do, and it's a way to interact with others. Story 19, not having friends obviously, but also if they never sit with anyone for lunch, and sometimes if they play multiplayer games alone, it's a good idea to propose to join them, but this is my personal opinion as a gamer. Story 20. Sometimes it's the little things, like oversharing with strangers, constantly seeking attention on social media, or always making themselves available, even at odd hours. It's often less about what they say and more about how much they crave connection. Story 21. Having autism, I don't feel lonely. I actually prefer spending time by myself more than the usual person, so being alone doesn't mean loneliness to me. Story 22. A lot of the time I hold my pillows or blankets like a person while lying in bed, so it feels like I am cuddling with a partner. Also, the amount of daydreaming I do about romantic stuff. Story 23. On Christmas Eve, write to wish your old friends a Merry Christmas. Let them know you appreciate the lifetime of friendship they shared with you, and wish them and their family the best in whatever they are doing. Story 24. Honestly, I think people are being antagonistic online on any social media, preferring an argument instead of the constant nothingness. I think this is why so many baby boomers say bizarre things on here or in Instagram comments. Story 25. I, a 29-year-old female, have a coworker, a 39-year-old male, who comes to tell me all of his life updates. We don't work in the same field, and we don't work on the same side of the building. I just showed him where the highlighters were one day because I was the closest person he could find. Now he tells me quite literally everything going on in his life. He's perfectly nice, but it makes me slightly uncomfortable because he becomes silent whenever anyone his age tries to have a conversation with him. And we don't actually have conversations. He talks at me and then returns to work. All that to say, coworkers who tell you everything about themselves with no prompting probably don't have very many friends. Story 26. The most obvious sign of loneliness is when their best friend becomes a houseplant. Eventually, you realize their plant is the happiest member of their circle, thriving while they silently wither. Sometimes, it takes a leaf with more social connection than we can muster to remind us that feeling invisible does not mean we are unworthy of care. Story 27. I had a friend who made it very hard to leave his place when we hung out there. Every time I hinted that I would be on my way soon, he came up with more ideas of things to do. He did everything he could to stop me from leaving, apart from physically stopping me, even making me feel guilty for leaving. It turned out I was his only friend, and he was just very lonely. Sadly, in the end, his overattachment to me is what drove me away. I still consider him an old friend and would greet him if I saw him again, but at this point, it's been years. Story 28. I work in retail optics, selling eyeglasses. It's the people who come in for the smallest of things numerous times a month. Most people come in for an eye test, purchase glasses, collect a week later, and you don't see them for 2 years. There are people who come in for any reason, and you end up chatting with them about random things for 10 to 20 minutes. It can be frustrating since you usually have something to do, but bearing in mind that they may be in for a chat since they have no one else helps level off that frustration. Story 29. A clear sign? When they start responding to their own social media posts as if they are having a full conversation with themselves. Bonus points if they are liking their own photos too. It's like watching someone try to convince the algorithm that they are popular enough to matter. Story 30. Talking to yourself and comforting yourself when you're alone. Not in my head, but vocally. I catch myself doing this all the time. I talk to myself in the house to self-motivate. I think it's because I crave social stimulation, and my voice is the only human interaction I have until I go outside. Story 31. I was at a store, Shoppers Drug Mart, about a week ago. There were some people sitting in a waiting area. Then, this one older guy started a conversation with a woman and a child. He began with a friendly comment, and she responded politely enough. Then, he kept going and just wouldn't stop. I figured right away he doesn't get many chances to talk to someone else in real life. Story 32. Obsession. Mind-numbing habits. Hell, even sex addiction and having a lot of friends show me layers of loneliness, which is simply the inability to be stuck with your own thoughts. Seeking a distraction from them is a sign. But the fact of the matter is, whether you made it past this, everyone is lonely. I think it's inherent in a civilization that relies on and has grown dependent on social media. Hence why I believe deviations can be noticed very fast in a person's developing years. Their interests take an obvious deviant turn. Story 33. Many good comments here. I had a situation earlier this year where I was dealing with anxiety, depression, and loneliness all at once. When I was with people, I felt very anxious. When I was alone, I felt lonely and depressed. So, I was in a difficult position either way. Seeing people in happy relationships makes me very jealous sometimes. I'm happy for them, but I want that for myself as well. Story 34. Thinking a simple interaction means you are best friends for life. I went on an outing with my therapist and this one lady. After the trip, the lady would constantly message me. I would politely respond, and she would reply within seconds. I do not check my phone often, and she got upset because I left her message unread for 20 hours. She assumed that we are best friends, and I am slowly ignoring her now because I do not have the social energy for this. Story 35. They info dump on anyone willing to entertain them for a second, even for casual small talk with, say, a coworker. I've met a few unfortunate people who, when I ask about their day or how they are, give me a complete synopsis of their entire life journey. Not good, not healthy. Story 36. Interacting with people, and if they think they are going to respond negatively or get angry, they will immediately get upset at that person to break off the conversation, just so they don't get rejected. Story 37. My widowed elderly neighbor frequently asks if I can help her out with the easiest of tasks. I find myself sometimes getting annoyed when she calls because she does call a lot, but I realized she probably just wants some company. Story 38. I don't know, staying home and not doing anything while you are on holiday because what's the point? I don't know anyone. I live alone, and everything has been done already. I'll just sit at home for 3 weeks and watch YouTube and movies, go get food when I need it, and that's it. Story 39. If they never bother to initiate a conversation about a unique topic, that's because they know no one around them cares about things that are actually important to them. Story 40. When they are in the Hypixel leaderboards, someone who grinds that much is unlikely to have a social life. Seriously though, when they kind of cling to you and talk, they are trying to keep the relationship alive because they are lonely and don't want to lose you.